The cold metal of the handcuffs dug painfully into her wrists as she stood tall, unflinching, facing the crowd at the bustling airport terminal. Dr. Ava Thomas, a renowned attorney and philanthropist, stood in sharp contrast to the sea of onlookers, some curious, others disgusted, and a few raising their phones to capture the unfolding scene. Officer Kyle Morris, a middle-aged man with an air of arrogance, stood beside her, tightening the cuffs a little more than necessary. His voice was laced with condescension as he sneered, "People like you don't belong in premium seating anyway." His words were loud enough for those nearby to hear. Ava, despite being a Harvard Law graduate and a leading figure in her humanitarian work, locked eyes with him, not a hint of shame or fear in her demeanor. She met his gaze with a steady calm, unshaken by his attempt to humiliate her. Officer Morris, puffing his chest with misplaced authority, had no idea who he was dealing with. What he didn't know was that the woman standing before him was far more than just another passenger. He was about to realize just how colossal a mistake he had made. Before we dive deeper into the events that led up to this moment, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from. Ava's story, what happens next, might leave you in disbelief. Earlier that same morning, long before her encounter at the airport, Ava had been preparing for a very different kind of journey. At 34, Ava exuded a quiet confidence, a result of having faced and overcome more challenges than most could ever imagine. That autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of her modest home just outside Washington, D.C. She was carefully packing medical supplies for a humanitarian mission to East Africa. Ava meticulously placed antibiotic medications, vaccines, and medical devices funded by her charity in her suitcase. These were the tools that would provide hope and healing for children and communities in dire need. Her phone rang, interrupting her moment of focus. The custom ringtone signaled the call was from her husband, Marcus. A photo of them together in Kenya from a few years ago appeared on the screen. Despite the years they had been married, Marcus still looked at Ava as if she was the most important thing in his life. Marcus, once a baggage handler at a small airport, had risen through the ranks to become the CEO of Horizon Airlines. In just over a decade, he had transformed a small local carrier into one of the nation's largest airlines, with over 15,000 employees and hundreds of aircraft. But no matter how successful he had become, Marcus remained humble. "Ready for your flight?" His voice carried a note of weariness from an early morning of back-to-back meetings. "Almost," Ava replied, smiling softly at the sound of his voice. "I've packed everything. This shipment could save countless lives in the refugee camps. Their clinic hasn't had any antibiotics in weeks. I wish I could be there with you," Marcus said, his regret evident. "But I got investors to deal with. The new routes in Nairobi are on the table today." Ava chuckled gently. "You'll be there for the opening of the new school next month. That's the real mission anyway. I've also asked Henry to meet you in Paris before your connecting flight," Marcus added. Henry, Horizon's European director, had insisted on handling the logistics himself. "You really didn't have to," Ava said, but she appreciated the gesture. "I can handle the connection." "I know, but I don't want to take any chances," Marcus insisted. Though Marcus was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, Ava still preferred the simplicity of flying commercial. She often chose economy class, but for this long journey to Africa, Marcus insisted on booking her first class. The black sedan pulled up outside their home. It wasn't a stretch limousine, which Ava would have refused. Instead, it was a modest car driven by Thomas, a family friend. Ava double-checked her passport, her foundation ID, and vaccination record before taking a deep breath and stepping into the car. The journey to the airport was smooth, and as they approached the airport, Ava's mind was focused. The sunlight reflecting off the terminal's glass and steel brought a familiar mix of determination and anticipation. She knew the journey would bring challenges, but she was ready. What she wasn't ready for was the encounter she'd have before even boarding her flight. At the Horizon Airlines check-in counter, the young agent, Jared, looked at her boarding pass, his eyes scanning between her ticket and his screen. "First class." He emphasized, his tone suggesting disbelief. "Are you sure about this?" Ava smiled politely, unfazed. Yes, it's confirmed. As she made her way toward security, Ava observed how others were treated. A well-dressed businessman was greeted warmly, no questions asked. But when she approached the expedited screening lane, Officer Morris stepped into her path. Regular screening is that way, he said, pointing toward a crowded line. I have priority access, Ava replied calmly, presenting her boarding pass. Without even acknowledging it, Officer Morris insisted on verifying her ticket. As she calmly requested the same treatment as the other passengers, the situation escalated. You accusing me of something? Morris asked, his tone growing hostile. I'm simply pointing out the inconsistency, Ava responded. A supervisor named Linda approached, but rather than resolving the issue, she deflected responsibility to Morris. Morris continued to mock her, clearly unaware of who she was and why she was there. Ava kept her composure, but the situation took a more personal turn when he began to sift through her humanitarian supplies. These meds, Morris sneered. You selling these? They're donations, Ava replied, showing him the official documents for a refugee camp in Kenya. Ava's patience was wearing thin. My travel arrangements have nothing to do with security. Morris, emboldened, leaned in, his words dripping with prejudice. People like you don't belong here. Ava remained calm. I'd like to speak to your supervisor, she requested. Morris refused, dismissing her rights. Despite the public humiliation, Ava decided to call Marcus. I need you at Terminal 3. Officer Kyle Morris is trying to detain me on false charges. Within moments, a wave of change swept through the airport. Security managers were notified, and soon, Marcus, along with his legal team, arrived at the terminal. Officer Morris's confidence quickly faded. Release her immediately, an official ordered. As Marcus walked in, flanked by his team, he took in the sight of Ava standing there, handcuffed but composed. After his quiet inspection of her wrists, he turned to Morris, his anger barely contained. You handcuffed my wife and told her people like her don't belong. The investigation was swift. Within hours, Morris was suspended, and new policies were put in place to ensure fairness and accountability. Ava advocated for reforms, pushing for the implementation of body cameras, independent oversight, and anti-bias training for officers. 6 months later, Ava passed through security at the airport again, this time without incident. She was greeted warmly by staff who respected her. No special treatment, just fairness. And there, at the security checkpoint, stood Officer Kyle Morris, now working in community relations, humbled by the events that had changed him. As he greeted Ava, his voice was sincere. Thank you for everything. Ava nodded, her calm response echoing a powerful truth. Everyone deserves first-class respect.